Okay, Matt, there's a lot to clean up here. So there's a number of tidbits that I'd like to hit on that you've reviewed here in the last 5 or 10 minutes. So I'll try to run them down in regards to my thoughts about some of these points. One would be, and the most recent would be, yes, it is the Cotton Bowl, and regardless of your view of college football history, think of it this way. What do we constantly do during these discussions? We're looking up records, we're looking up these sorts of things. And when you post a USC all time bowl record, you want that record to be as good as it possibly can be. When we look up top 10 finishes for teams, how many times did USC finish in the top 10? Well, they're going to finish in the top 10 if they finish out this season with a win. If they don't, they will not finish in the top 10. All of those things that we seem to run to as college football fans when we're making arguments about who's got the greatest program, who did this, who did that. Well, it goes back to games like this. What's your bowl record? How many times did you finish in the top 10? Those sorts of things come up on a regular basis. And people remember bowl games. I am not going to argue that it hasn't been diminished because of the playoff. There's no question about that. But people remember bowl games. Don't you, as USC fans out there, don't you remember the bowl appearances? You may not remember exactly that Cal game in 04 versus the Washington State game versus then you kind of but you remember, yeah, we played this team in this bowl game. We put 17 was the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, 16 was the Rose Bowl against Penn State, 15 I believe was a Nebraska Holiday Bowl. There was 14 was a Wisconsin Holiday Bowl. You can go to Georgia Tech in the Sun Bowl. I can do it, and I'm not a USC fan. I can tell you who they played every year in these bowl games, but I can't remember every specific regular season game. They are memorable. The other point to be made here, people, is that this can't be said about every regular season game versus every bowl game, but it can be said about 90% of them. And this is why I don't understand people's disregard for their team's performance in bowl games. Anytime your team is playing, unless it's a conference championship game, which USC was certainly fortunate enough and earned a conference championship game, every time you're playing, and that includes even the UCLA game, even the Notre Dame game, there are other games being played at that time, meaning College Football Nation's attention is not solely focused on you and your team. They're watching this game and that game, and the audience is divided. Bowl games, for the most part, there's some overlap, but most of them, and specifically this game, all of College Football Nation, anybody who wants to be watching sports, basically, unless they want to watch some random NBA game, but people that are watching big time sports during the holidays, they will be watching the Cotton Bowl. You will have more people watching this game, USC fans, watching your game than any of your other games. So you want to perform in front of a national audience. Those are pretty much my highlights when it comes to just specifically USC. And then I had some other notes about
Mark, gather up your other points, because I just want to make one interjection on that last point you raised. You can fire up your other talking points while I talk for just 1 minute. And that is that just in terms of the bowl schedule, the Cotton Bowl is going up against the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is formerly the Outback Bowl, and the Citrus Bowl. Now, the ReliaQuest is Mississippi State against Illinois. So that is like a third tier level matchup. I mean, it's interesting because you have Mike Leach against Brett Bielema, but those are moderately good teams. That's a moderately good bowl. It's not certainly a king size matchup. And then the other bowl, USC and the Cotton Bowl, are going to go up against on Monday, January 2nd. So it's January 2nd because when January 1st is on a Sunday, that's to the NFL. So they put the New Year's Bowls on January 2nd. The other bowl, the Cotton Bowl, is going to go up against is the Citrus, and that's LSU against Purdue. So a couple things there. One, Jeff Brom, the coach of Purdue, he's probably going to go to Louisville. He's probably going to make the switch to the Cardinals, and that would certainly take some of the air out of that game. But the other thing is Jaden Daniels has 4 weeks to heal up from, the treatment he got from Jalen Carter and the rest of that Georgia defensive line, which tenderized him. So a healthy, rested Jaden Daniels against Purdue, like LSU Purdue, that should be an absolute blowout. That should be boat race city, USA. So, in terms of the 3 games that are going on late morning on January 2nd, the Cotton Bowl is by far the best and most interesting matchup of the 3. So that the ratings for that game are going to be good, but moreover, the ratings, the number of people watching the Cotton Bowl are going to dwarf the ratings for the other games that are going on in that same time window with Mississippi State, Illinois, and LSU Purdue. USC Tulane definitely going to be the most attractive matchup of the 3.
Well, I will say, out of if you're talking about just fringe college football fans or people just wanting to watch sports and whatever the biggest and best sport is for the day, they're certainly going to gravitate to a Cotton Bowl above a Citrus Bowl, and certainly the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is
especially with the Heisman winner too. You're going to be able to watch Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams.
Now, if you're talking about me, though, I'm an aberration. Those 3 games on my scale are almost equal for me. And if anything, actually, I'm drawn to watching the SEC take on the Big Ten. But that's me. I'm an outlier.
I absolve you.
I'm an outlier.
I grant you absolution.
In regards to the Pac-12 and these 7 bowl games, I believe it's 7. Tim had put up that if chalk prevails, that the Pac-12 will win 5 of the 7. I will say this about the North Carolina-Oregon game in particular, that if you're just basically looking at the 2 conferences, the ACC and the Pac-12, and saying, is this a fair seeded game? Yes, it's a fair seeded game. So North Carolina is the 2 seed as the championship game loser and the team with the second best conference record in the ACC. They may not be the second best team in the ACC. I believe that would go to Florida State, but by seeding, they are the second best team. And Oregon is certainly, by lieu of not making the championship game, they're a lower seed. And again, Oregon State, Washington, it's just, I can't separate them. The only separation for me is Washington went 10-2 overall. So Oregon, yes, to Matt's point, Vegas has this as a 10.5-point game. And before I looked at the spread, that's about the number I had. Oregon is a better football team than North Carolina. There's no question about that. So they need to take care of business and win that game. No questions. But in terms of comparing the 2 conferences and the seedings of those 2 teams, yes, that will look good for the Pac-12 winning that game against North Carolina. They can't be concerned with or pay pity on the ACC having poor teams in the 2 position in their seeding. So Oregon needs to take care of business and win that game. And unfortunately, my last point concerning, I got 2 more points. One concerning the seedings in these games is, as a guy who wants to, and I know, Matt, you're in this business as well, both as a fan and an analyst, as a professional, like to compare the conferences and have real data that means something. Unfortunately, we're in a day and age where you have to take into consideration opt-outs, and the opt-outs are, to a certain extent, the tangible conclusion of what used to be here the last 5 to 10 years of how much are these teams invested. And so it used to be an intangible of us kind of guessing who's up for this game, who's not up for this game. But the players still all showed up for the game. But is this team that expected to be elite, to be playing in a New Year's Six Bowl, are they let down and not going to show up? Now we tangibly know players will not be showing up for the game, and then we've got to kind of gauge it. Well, they're missing 4 guys, they're only missing 2, or whatever the case might be, because I like to look at these bowl results as a way to measure the conferences and evaluate the conferences and compare the conferences, because the one advantage of bowl season is, even though the seedings aren't perfect, they're extremely close. So they're either dead on, or they're within 1 or 2 seats, or they're comparable matchups versus the non-conference games in September, which, based on scheduling from 10 or 12 years ago, typically give us very uneven matchups in regards to seedings and trying to compare teams from different conferences. So I love the bowl games for so many different reasons. Just takes me back. It's tradition. It's just it's Americana, and I love the bowl games, and I will forever love the bowl games, and nobody can tell me that they're meaningless. And my trump card there is, again, I will go back to, when is your team going to be watched by more of an audience in what is typically an exclusive TV window, or in this case, shared with other two inferior games?
I would only make the added point that, bowl week, or at least the heart of the bowl season, it occurs during the 1 week of the year when, like, the day of the week doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And this is not a sports point. This is a living in America point. Like, the week between Christmas Day and January 1, or in this case January 2, like the days of the week melt away. Like, no day feels like a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's just that 1 week. And, obviously a lot of people are taking time off because you have the two holidays and you have the two big weekends, especially when the observation of these two holidays is either on a Monday or a Friday. So this year, this bowl season, the observed holidays are on Mondays for Christmas and then for New Year's. So, like, especially Friday, December 30 through Monday, January 2nd. That's just a 4-day weekend when people are just going to be taking time off and they're going to be watching football. Yeah. So, like, the bowl games are situated at a point on the calendar. It's not just the product itself. This is a time of year, middle of winter, 2 holiday weekends. People need a break, from life and all its troubles before you go back to your regular, ordinary workaday existence. That's another reason why these bowl games are such television magnets, and why ESPN, has put so much effort into putting as many of these games on TV as possible. Let's remind ourselves that it's not about the ticket sales, especially in places like the Bahamas Bowl, or these other games that are, we've seen a real proliferation of pre-Christmas bowl games. And a lot of people say, well, why the short break between the end of the regular season and bowl season? And why play these games in out of the way places before 10, 12,000 fans? Like, the television optics are terrible. This must be bad business. No, you're getting all these television eyeballs, and you're getting all this real estate for advertisers. That is where ESPN prints money with these bowl games. And so you have an audience that is just willing to just sink into its couch in the middle of a bitter winter, in most of the country, and not so much here in Phoenix or in Southern California, but certainly like in all those Midwestern and Southern and Northern markets. There's just an avalanche of advertising opportunity, and it reinforces just the centrality and visibility that these bowl games really have. I think that a lot of people, and you would agree with me, Mark, underestimate the reach that these bowl games have as a television entity.
You bring up a good point that I underline during this type of discussion on a regular basis. People mistakenly, and I get it, it's not out of anything that wouldn't make sense to the eyeball. When you see a stadium that's 85% empty, you equate that to, well, nobody cares. This doesn't mean anything. But when you've got a school from the MAC playing a school from the Sun Belt Conference, and they're playing in the Bahamas, or they're playing somewhere that's, two smaller schools where only so many people are going to travel that far, only so many people from the immediate area are going to go to that game, you're going to have a small attendance at the game. However, do not mistake that with how many people are watching on television. Take some of your favorite college basketball games during the winter that you hold dear. Oh, it's
Louisville, Kentucky. That's the classic example.
It's not going to come close to the TV rating that, any of these bowl games will hit. No question.
Yep, that's right.